I would like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Hemsworth, for securing this debate, which is an opportunity for us as members of Parliament to think about the sort of society we wish to create. Yeah. It's interesting that Conservative members intervened on my honourable friend to talk about raising thresholds and fairness and so on. But if any of my constituents are tuning into this debate, let's not lose sight of the fact that currently only 5% of people pay inheritance tax, which means that 95% don't pay it. So I think if we're talking about fairness and the type of society that we want to create, we should look at the implications of either abolishing or providing further concessions to those currently liable for inheritance tax. I know this is a very narrowly defined debate, and on previous occasions I've raised issues around if we are serious about providing additional support for ordinary working people, not 5%, but you know, the 95%. Why aren't we considering proportional property tax to replace council tax? In the case of Easington, in my constituency, that would boost the income of every household on average by more than £750 per year, not 5%. So there are levers that can be pulled in, and that would be revenue neutral. It wouldn't involve levying any additional taxes. It's a simple matter of applying a proportional property tax at a fixed percentage of the value of the property. But anyway, the question that we're facing today is... I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Who I consider a friend for giving way. I'm particularly interested in his points in regards to a proportional property tax. We know from the research that's been done that northern constituencies like his and like mine would benefit significantly from that. Is it Labour's proposal to include it in their manifesto?
Regrettably, at this point, no. I am not, as the honourable gentleman is well aware, a spokesperson for the opposition Treasury bench. I do think, irrespective of which political party grasps this nettle, Sir Robert, there are enormous electoral dividends. And there have been academic studies about the benefits of proportional property tax. My constituency, the honourable gentleman's constituency, Hartlepool, I think virtually every constituency in the North and Midlands would be better off by it. But I do apologise. We're talking about inheritance tax. I was tempted off the subject. It was my own fault, and I'm sorry. But the fundamental question here, Sir Robert, is: are we going to champion equality, fairness, and social justice, or are we going to perpetuate wealth and inequality? Are we a democracy or a plutocracy? The current system is already generous. As my honourable friend said, it allows £325,000 to be passed on tax-free. Where a child or grandchild inherits an estate, including a home, as my honourable friend said in the earlier intervention, in his contribution, the threshold is £500,000. Above these thresholds, a 40% tax rate is applied, meaning a £1 million estate would pass on to their beneficiaries £800,000. But as my honourable friend indicated, there's chronic tax avoidance. And in 2016, he did reference the Duke of Westminster, who inherited a huge estate, and estimates suggest that was worth around £9 billion. And reasonably, the Exchequer would anticipate a tax liability on such an estate of about £3.5 billion at 40%. However, by employing tax avoidance, using very clever lawyers and the best advice on trust laws, the aristocracy and the richest in our society, sadly, regularly avoid paying their fair share of tax. Now, we should be outraged at this. You know, I suspect in other countries there would be riots and demonstrations, but that isn't our way. But I think part of the problem as well is the issues are not aired in an objective way through the mainstream media. Because this abuse of privilege doesn't only entrench economic inequality, it places a larger tax burden on the vast majority, the 95%, who do not inherit large family assets and who are struggling in this current cost of living crisis, struggling with stagnating wages and the highest tax burden in modern history. Tory plans to cut inheritance tax won't help my constituents, and instead of funding tax cuts for the richest on the backs of the poor, the government should in fact be looking to close inheritance tax loopholes exploited by the wealthiest. I believe, Sir Robert, it was the 6th Duke of Westminster, Gerald Grosvenor, who passed away in 2016. He'd outlined his advice to entrepreneurs. He was speaking at some sort of a conference or event on how to be successful. And he suggested the best way was to have an ancestor who was good friends with William the Conqueror. As with many tongue-in-cheek comments, there's a grain of truth in this advice. Inheritance tax is meant to address widening inequality in society by taxing those with the greatest assets. However, wealth and privilege are entrenched in this country. Elite schools dominate our politics, with prime ministers from Winchester and Eton. Elite universities account for the majority of our leaders. Well, perhaps I should correct that. A single elite university. Post-war, 13 out of 17 prime ministers, over 75% attended Oxford University. When our leaders are entrenched in wealth and privilege, we shouldn't be surprised that the Conservative Party seeks to maintain a status quo that sustains this existence. Our society is dysfunctional when the richest 50 families in the UK have more wealth than half the population. Just think about that. More wealth than 33.5 million people. And a recent analysis by Ben Tippett and Raphael Wildor from the University of Greenwich found that if the wealth of the super-rich continues to grow at the current rate, by 2035, it's not too far away, the wealth of the richest 200 families will be larger, 200 families in the UK will be larger than the whole of the UK GDP. There is immense wealth in our society, and I think most people don't realise this. There's sufficient wealth in society to address the range of economic, social and investment challenges that we face. The accumulation of wealth, concentrated in the hands of a few, is detrimental to a fair society. Those with immense wealth are not using it for the good of society. My constituency, no surprise, Sir Robert, is devoid of benevolent billionaires. I wish we had a few. I'm not a believer in trickle-down economics. However, what my constituents do, they look to government to create an economy and a society that uses the wealth that it has generated to improve the quality of lives for all. Yep. But that's a task that this government is failing to deliver on, not through neglect, but through a deliberate policy that entrenches and expands pre-existing economic inequalities. Yeah.